I'd like to say a few words about your arrest record. What the hell?
Yo, the sign is real simple, B. It says wrap it up. Wrap that shit up, B.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Man, you want some too? You better wrap it up.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today with me I got Comics Perch. We're going to do the weekly wrap-up, talk about some of the big releases from DC, Marvel on the indie scene, and talk about some of the comics that stood out. You ready for this, buddy?
Absolutely. Great to talk to you today.
It's always good to have you on the channel. So DC Comics was obviously the big one. We had the new creative team on Batman 86. We had a Daphne Byrne #1 from Hill House Comics on Black Label, Hawkman #20, and Young Justice #12, which is the start of like a Wonder Comics crossover event. What stood out for you?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, DC had a bunch of, they're starting their year off finally. I think last week we had the end of a few things, but this week felt like really the start to their 2020. We're getting back into kind of key storylines. We're pushing toward the summer. We finally got this new creative team on Batman. What's interesting with Batman is that we've been told already that this run's going to get interrupted at least for a period of time with 5G and some of the other crossover stuff going on. So it's hard not to read it with that kind of in mind as you're looking through it. Is he really laying down long-term plans, or is it just kind of a temporary kind of insertion run? It was a good story, but I admit for Batman, it didn't leave as much on the table as I thought it would. It really kind of set a few things up. We got a little bit of Deathstroke. We got a brief kind of fight. We got some mystery going on, but there's a lot of it's now I'm looking at it completely as a shortened run. I don't know. What did you think of it?
It felt like he was trying to undo some of the things, or maybe flesh out some of the things, especially Alfred. But I'm with you. There wasn't a lot of long-term things. There were some interesting ideas put out there, but it felt like he was putting a lot of emphasis on Bruce's loss of Alfred. Yeah,
I agree. And it makes me wonder if this run of his, this at least first section of it, is going to be more of kind of an epilogue to that story. Now, I'll throw out a wild prediction for you. I still, based on the way Alfred died, I think they left enough of an out that he is kidnapped or trapped somewhere. Or I know they've gone in with the death, but I still believe that parts of all this is to build up for at least giving themselves an out if fan reaction is too hostile, that they can bring it back. But be that as it may, it was nice to see a different take on Batman, a more kind of maybe more traditional, serious detective, grim Batman. Not as he's not emoting. He's certainly dealing with the loss of Alfred, but he's also getting to business, and that's how the issue felt.
Yeah, it was a good first start. It wasn't perfect, but he had to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the trick will be, I do believe writers, especially when they have a long-term plan, and James absolutely, in everything that he's done in his newsletter and his conversations, he has a long-term plan, and that's great. So if we're just kind of laying a bunch of the pieces in place, which is sort of what's happening here, for a nice 2-3 year run, getting a lot of things ready, great. We'll look back on this and great. I recently went back and reread the first issue of Tom King's run, and it's very interesting in hindsight to look at that and kind of what he was setting up and then where we landed. So now looking at the Tynion run and where this goes, I'm also curious how long Tony Daniel actually stays with the book.
It's only 2 issues, I believe.
Yeah, there was an interruption, but it was unclear if he was going to come right back or if he's just gone. So I think there's a lot of missing questions, and I believe that a lot of fans are going to be looking at this going, okay, there's some things we like here, but is it going to stick? Are we going to go with this, or is this just kind of a temporary move? And ultimately, I think it fills out for a lot of what DC is doing, which is, how does this first half of the year matter when we have this big looming crisis and crossover and 5G and everything else? How do we make this first half of the year really matter, or is this filler?
So was there anything else from DC that stood out for you this week?
I think Hawkman definitely did. Hawkman's just a title that is written well, done well, and I think it also it is doing a good job of interfacing with You're the Villain and the Batman Who Laughs and all this stuff. It's managing to bring those things in, but keep the focus on Hawkman. Hawkman still feels like the central character of the book. We're getting a little bit of why Hawkman's so dangerous. I mean, it's really taking advantage of this run to make that character strong. So I think that's been really, really good there. And I do think Catwoman was a better issue this week. There's a few things that that were there. I think Batman and the Outsiders was a good quality issue this week. It's very, very consistent in what it does. So there were some good things with DC, but again, it's, there's already a lot of talk backstage, if you will, with DC, that they are kind of having to do a bunch of filler type issues, sort of like what they did for Convergence. And you're starting to definitely feel at least some anticipation of, okay, what's coming next and how quickly can we get to it?
I agree with that. So, moving on to Marvel, they're Marvel, so they had more #1 issues. You had Marvel's X #1, Ruins of Ravencroft, Carnage #1, Star #1, the End Miles Morales #1. Within Dawn of X, you had 4 issues: X-Force #5, Fallen Angels #5, New Mutants #5, Excalibur #5, and then outside of that, Amazing Spider-Man 37, Venom 22, which is the second issue of the Venom Island story arc, and Immortal Hulk 29. What stood out for you with Marvel Comics this week?
I really like New Mutants. I do, and it's a shame because I think Hickman's story of trying to bring the characters back together, and it really is reconnecting with some of these classic New Mutant characters. I liked it. I thought the humor worked. I enjoyed that we're getting Starjammers and Shi'ar, and I liked everything that was going on there. I'm disappointed that in the preview for the next issue, we're going back to the On-Earth, far less interesting storyline that they've got. But it's a solid issue. Good characterization. Everybody felt unique. It was nice. A lot of attention was on Venom. Donny Cates was citing that this was going to be the break the internet issue. I think that's a little bit of overhype, particularly since we've seen how people can repair themselves and other things there. Spoiler, there's a hand gets chopped off. So that's what's going on there. It's hard to look at Venom, for example, and all the attention, all the hype, and it's a great, people are enjoying the book. It's a good book, but it does feel like an event set up an event set up an event. You had Absolute Carnage, set up Venom Island, set up the Null storyline in a year or maybe less, and it just feels like this perpetual, we're raising the stakes for the next thing, for the next thing, for the next thing, and at some point you just kind of want it to move on to something else. I thought the key issue or the key moment in Venom actually was his son with the little bit of what Carnage or in a box or what was going on there. That was potentially maybe the bigger moment that got overshadowed.
I thought it was Scream for a moment, but I think you're right. That is Carnage because he was red instead of orange, right?
Yeah, and Scream's in a separate book, a different limited series is going on. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it is Carnage. But at any rate, I think the other thing with the Marvels you hit upon, I was a fan of the original Marvels series. I thought that was a really cool book and did some new things with the Marvel Universe. But in this issue, this new one, it does feel like a copy of the old. Some interesting stuff there. All this, as I'm hearing myself talk, it all sounds very negative. Certainly don't mean it that way. There are some interesting books. If you like certain things, if you like the classic Spider-Man feel, you like what Spencer and Ottley did, Amazing Spider-Man's tapping back into that, so good. If you like, if you've been liking Black Cat, it's consistent. If you've been liking Excalibur, it's consistent. All these books are staying more or less consistent. I think the big exception to that maybe is the Hulk, where if you jumped on board at the beginning with this kind of horror-themed title, you're in a very different place now, where it's superhero kind of monster fight. And maybe it's going to get back to there, or maybe not. They're trying to do some different things with the Hulk, but you do start to wonder where it's going. And I also start to wonder if Al Ewing's focus starts to get split now that he's doing a lot of the things that were teed up in Incoming and New Kree, Skrull, War, and all the rest. Al Ewing tends to degrade when he has multiple things going on. That's why I think the Hulk was very good at the beginning. He was very focused on it, and I think we're starting to see some of that lack of focus.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy is also about to debut with his new take on it. So he'll be doing an event and then 2 series instead of just 1.
Yeah, and I think he's at least helping helm a couple other books as well. He'll be I mean he's being spread very thin, and I think that's. I wish the companies wouldn't do that. There's actually no evidence that any writer or creative talent does well when you start to get them on 2 or 3 things. You look at Bendis over at DC. Focus is good. I understand there's some cost savings maybe that gets involved there, but it's not a good thing.
So we'll move on to the indie comics. Last week was a bare offerings, but a lot more indie comics. Image, you have the Clock number 1. I believe that's Top Cow. Gidion's Fall 20, Ascender number 8. So I believe those are both Jeff Lemire. At IDW, we got TMT 101 is the arrival of Sophie Campbell on art, as well as the main scripter, I believe. At Boom, you've got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers TMNT number 2. Also, the final issue of Strange Skies over East Berlin from Jeff Loveness, which is a really cool story. Dark Horse, you got Stranger Things Into the Fire number 1. And then at Vault, is my opinion, easily the best comic of the week is Plot number 4.
Yeah. I thought that was wonderful. I thought Plot number was great. I think Strange Skies is great. I think Oblivion Song is another book that flies under the radar for a lot of people. And it's just a very solid Skybound Image title right now, doing some interesting things and creating quite a huge universe. We haven't heard how long that book's going to go, but it's good stuff. I think what Lemire's doing is excellent on all of his titles. I think he's somebody who's clearly built more for the indies than for the big two, and kind of managing his own show. So it was a good week, and I think next week is looking pretty positive as well. I don't know. We're into a world where I think the indie market is finding its footing, and if we continue to get kind of event exhaustion with what's going to happen in the second half of the year with DC and Marvel, I see a lot of small indie books at the very early stage in their runs that are going to help pick up that steam for readers.
I wanted to jump back over to TMNT 101. I don't understand why it would be considered controversial Sophie Campbell coming on this series. Already illustrated a wonderful micro series back in the day. Now, I thought the issue itself was boring. It wasn't a lot of fun, but it looked phenomenal. What did you think of TMNT 101?
Yeah, I think it looked great. The story is what it is. I think maybe people are setting too high an expectation of it, maybe based on what Batman that crossover did in a different way. I'm not sure why that got some irritation on the story. In terms of the controversy of the artist, I think at the end of the day, the work looks good. So
looks great. It is a huge step up in my opinion.
Yeah, it is, and it looks fine. It's appealing in how it. I'm not sure. I think sometimes people get kind of too hung up on maybe past irritations or some comment somebody made that gets circulated around. I see it myself. I'll post something that I think is kind of a joke, and 2 days later, it's got 500 to 1,000 likes, and people have spun it in 800 directions. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of funny. I want people to consume it like junk food and then let it go. And a lot of the comments that I notice people get hung up with Sophie Campbell and that whole zone tends to be some simple little thing that people are holding on to. And at the end of the day, they're missing out on some good work. I think that title looked great. I think her art fits that book quite a bit. So, I don't know what to say. It looks nice, and as long as the story and the work is good, what more do you want?
Yeah, it was interesting. I really liked the introduction where it was basically, I think it was Donatello had a journal. It was kind of breaking that thing, but it kind of meandered after that. But man, it just looked excellent. Yeah,
and I think that's what the title needs. It needs some really strong visuals. If you go way back, 20, 30 years now of that book, the very striking, unique visuals were what sold it. Were what got it on the map. Not just the characters, but it looked and felt very different as a book. And so I think it looks great, and I'm anxious to see where it goes.
All right. So if you had 2 or 3 comics that you said were must buy this week, what were they?
So for Marvel, I think New Mutants. If you're an X fan, I think it's got to be New Mutants. And on the DC side, as cliche as it sounds, I think Batman is the one to buy. This is setting up a new world, so that's what you have to do. Those are the obvious picks. So I feel like I'm not giving the best.
Taking the easy road on me.
I'm taking the easy route on you. I think Hawkman. I'll go with Hawkman as a DC book that really is doing a great job of building the character throughout all this. And if Marvel, if I'm leaving New Mutants,
I would go Symbiote, Spider-Man, Alien Reality.
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
I was just looking at that. I think Peter David's doing a really nice job, and it makes me wonder why they put Peter David on kind of the stuff they don't really need to care or worry about. And he's showing he still has the chops to do really great work. So why not put him on something? I mean, I don't know. I think Peter David's one of those underutilized writers at Marvel, like Chris Claremont clearly and a few others. So yeah, that's a very good book.
Mm-hmm. And then of course, my indie books, the plot for. Is there an indie book you thought was actually better?
No, I think not better. I think that was the highlight of the week. Like I said, Oblivion Song is a book that you can pick up and trade fairly cheap, and I would urge people, if you've never seen or looked at that, there's a good story there. Yeah,
I mean, Robert Kirkman's about as solid as you get on indies. You outside of maybe like Jeff Lemire as far as quality, like, it's always going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Lemire is doing on Ascender, I think, is also these aren't necessarily the best individual issues, but in terms of a run, we are seeing a really good run of comics.
Well, I want to say thank you very much for joining me. Help do a quick rundown of this week of the comics this week. Maybe help out the viewers find some of those hidden gems that are out there. I think we all knew about Batman 86, but if you didn't know about Hawkman 20, go check it out. Thanks a lot, Perch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.